Hey guys, John here from the Reaper blog. Today we're looking at the new features in Reaper 5.50, just released. We're going to start off with automation items. They allow you to contain, move, and transform portions of envelopes, envelopes being automation points. Items can be pooled or unpooled, which means that changes to one will affect something elsewhere in the project. You can loop them, you can stretch them, they can be skewed where the shapes change over time. So the points can be squished on the front end of an item and then stretched out at the top end of an item. And you can also phase shift the automation points. This will all make sense once I get into showing you. We can name, save, and load automation items. Automation items support separate baseline, amplitude, and looping for individual instances of pooled automation items. By default, if you Alt-drag in the envelope lane, you'll create a new automation item. There are also mouse modifiers for the item and the item edges. There are also actions to insert, duplicate, split, glue, delete, etc. So automation items, think of them as containers which contain either hand-drawn automation, recorded automation, generated automation through an LFO. They can be looped. You can make duplicates of automation. So let's say every chorus has a certain automation shape for a particular instrument. You'll need to draw it once, and then if you change your mind later, it can be updated in both of those sections of the song at the same time. As I said, you can generate LFOs. There's a lot of things you can do with it. It's a really cool feature, and happy to show it to you today. So let's start off with this hi-hat, just a straight 16th note loop. The exact same sound all the way through, no variation. Let's open up the volume lane, and you can just right-click and go to volume if you don't know the shortcut for that. And as it said in the changelog, we can Alt or Option drag to create a new automation item. Now, if you look closely, it says the number 2 here for the second automation item that I have in this project. And if we double-click, it brings up the automation item properties. So within this window, we have information about the item, position, the length, the start offset, the playback rate. We can view these in time or beats. We can loop this item here. We can change the baseline level. Baseline level is whatever was the default setting when we added in that automation item. So volume at 0 dB. But we can scale that right here. Once we have a few automation points, we can scale the amplitude. We can reverse the direction of the points, things like that. Pooled copies means duplicates. So before we duplicate this, let's actually get some points in here. So it's drawing in automation here is just like we would do on a track envelope. In fact, this is if we add in an automation item on top of what's there already, it will just continue on as before, as usual. So for example, this is a 16th note pattern. Let's put in some variation on this. So let's just go up and down a little bit to add some movement to this. And then back to the default at the end. I think that'll work. It's a starting point. Double click this. We're going to loop it. Yes. So drag that out. And now that pattern is repeated through the entire song. It was a little extreme with those movements, so we can change this amplitude to kind of compress those envelope points. Or we can expand them. Reverse it. So just adding in a little bit of movement helps with that. Now let's look in mouse modifiers and automation item edge. So by default, it's going to move the item edge, as in change where the position of the item edge is. We can also stretch automation items. Option drag to stretch or shrink. And let's just make this, I guess, half as long. half as long to make it play twice as fast. So let's hear that. So that's pretty easy. We can also duplicate this, create pooled duplicate. And now changes we make here are going to affect this duplicated item. And that also means that changes, well, when we click this, will also affect that other item. So this doesn't have to be right beside. This could be in another section of the song. We can just drag that over here. So we got this over here, paste that, and then drag this over. And when we change and we make changes here, it affects, let's say this is the first chorus, this is the second chorus. It's affecting both sections at the same time. Although rate changes like this don't affect the pooled duplicates. It's just something to keep in mind. Once we have these automation changes written, we could actually take this item, this automation item, go to a different track. I don't know, let's say the snare drum, and open up our volume automation lane, put our cursor where we want this to be pasted to, and paste. And I had an item there before. Okay, so we've got this. Now let's look at the number on that automation item. This is a 3, this is a 2. So that means that changes we make to this one, changes we make to this item or this item will not affect this one. This is just a regular copy, not a pooled copy. So these ones are pooled duplicates, where it's essentially the same item but in a different location. And this is a independent item. All right, so now let's look at the LFO generation option. So we're going to take this synth, which sounds like this, and we're going to open up REAPER, where I have a bandpass filter. And what we're going to automate is this frequency. So I'm just going to wiggle that a little bit, go to parameters, show track envelope, and to insert a automation item, we can make a time selection like that. And actually, let's make it 1 bar. And right click, and in automation items menu, new automation item. So that'll use the time selection for the item. Again, if you just hold down Alt and drag anywhere in the automation lane, it will create the automation item. All right, so we're going to focus on this area here. Double click to open that up. Going to loop this. We're going to choose an LFO shape. Let's do triangle. It's automatically going to put in the points to create a triangle shape. If we want this to start at a different position, we use the phase control like that. So 25% will start at the highest value, go to the minimum value halfway through the cycle. We can skew the amplitude so that it's a little hard to tell what's going on there until we put in a couple more cycles. So let's change this up. So now we've got 24 cycles on the LFO. Let's listen to that. Way too much. Let's set that to 8. And what that's actually doing can be seen here. So let's reduce the baseline so it's not going all the way to the top. Let's reduce the amplitude so it's compressed that a little bit. Actually, I do need to move that up so it's more in the middle section. So baseline scales everything up or down. Amplitude compresses or expands when it's reversed. So let's say something like that for our LFO. That's pretty cool. Phase shifts the position in time. You can see that in the arrange view. So let's do 25. Amplitude skew, when it's pulled this direction, the end of the pattern is going to be shrunk. If I expand the amplitude, you can really see that as the cycle repeats, it's going to be more and more compressed, shrunk down. We can reverse that so that the beginning of the pattern is skewed. We set that to 4, it's a little less drastic. Let's change that to saw shape. Okay, so there's also frequency skew, which is going to stretch and contract in between points. So let's do this pretty extreme. It's going to have slower automation moves and then really quick ones towards the end of the pattern. We set it to none, it clears all that, and back to the beginning. So this stuff is a lot of fun. It's a great way of working now. For creative effects or just simply copying, pasting. A couple more things to talk about in preferences. That's editing behavior automation. There's this section here on automation items. You can have it loop by default. You can have the defaults for editing baseline and amplitude for pooled copies, having that checked automatically. What happens when you're copying and pasting and things like that. So have a look through that, figure out what works best for you. Have a look at the mouse modifiers. Even if you're not using automation items, do have a look in your envelope segment and envelope lane mouse modifiers because there are some new things there, such as drop pooled copy of the selected automation item that was not there before this update. So have a look at that stuff. And the final thing I'll show you is in action list and type in automation item. We have many new actions for automation items. You can open up the properties, you can delete the item, preserving the points. You can duplicate and pool, duplicate the item without pooling, glue it. You can insert one from your time selection. You can load an item. You can remove the items from the pool, which will make the item independent if it was previously pooled. You can rename the item, save it. You can set your loop points and your time selection to the selected automation item. You can split the item to make a new independent section of that. Many new things there. Please have a look and explore these features on your own. Something else that's new is that envelopes will use the initial value when you're adding effects parameter envelopes. What that means is that whatever the setting is in the plugin, when you add in the track envelope, it's not going to use the default value. It's going to use the actual value that was originally there right before you press that button. This is the expected behavior and was something that kind of just got missed for a long time. This is actually a really big change. Often I'm mixing in latch preview mode automation, and I really enjoy that, but the fact that it wasn't adding in the last used positions for parameters, it made it quite a few things frustrating, and I wasn't really even realizing what the problem was. So let's say that the default value for, let's say, the bypass on this plugin is off. And I only want it to turn on the delay in this section of the song. So I'm going to start with the plugin bypassed. I'm going to set this to latch preview mode. Latch preview. I'm going to make a time selection. And in this time selection, I'm just going to click the bypass button. It's going to put that envelope in and make sure that in this section, we want this turned on. So we'll do that. And then use the action to write the current positions or the latched values to the selection. So I've got that set to L on my keyboard. And it's going to write that position in. And before this update, it would have this set as on, and it would almost do it backwards, or it would write in points and there would be no difference in and out. Very frustrating, actually. So I'm glad that that is fixed. If we put this back on read mode, so the plugin is off in the first section, and it's going to turn on. And it turns off again. So something that's really simple, but really, really helpful. Okay, so something quick I can show you is in the metronome settings. We can enable the metronome by a left click, and if we can change the settings with a right click. In this window, we now have the option of doing triplets. It's really simple. The default is a primary beat and then 3 secondary beats. We can change this to A, T, T, and an A. And we can play the metronome. Right? Or we can change this to T, A, A, A. It's going to give us first 3 hits and then quarter note ticks. And we can do this in pretty much any order. So capital A, T, T. And we can also do capital A, lowercase a, period, T to put in a space. So I think that's going to open up a lot of possibilities there. Pretty cool. I think that's something that might be overlooked in the changelog. All right, so the next big feature in this update is spectrogram editing. So we can now do spectral editing right inside the arrange view in real time, non-destructively. It's pretty amazing. It's not going to completely replace your Isotope RX or your Adobe Audition spectral editing, stuff like that. For certain things, this is going to work really well. And the fact that it's right inside the arrange view, you don't need to go to a separate program, and it's in real time. You can always adjust things later. It's pretty great. These 2 clips here are from a film that I worked on. They're pretty noisy. They've got some serious problems that spectral editing can be used to fix. First of all, I've got this action here, spectrogram toggle, show spectrogram for selected items. I'm going to run that. So it's just these items in the project that get their spectral view set up. So I'm going to zoom in on this first one, and I'm going to adjust the settings in the peaks display window just to get this looking a little bit nicer for us. Not nicer, but we want these colors to really pop out those problem areas. The colors are mostly personal preference, but if it's this bright yellow thing, that kind of makes it obvious. So let's play this first clip.
Before.
So play it again.
Before.
So you can see these horizontal lines. There's this one here and this one here. And these are ringing frequencies. It's actually interference on the microphone. This top one is not so much of a problem because it's so high frequency, but this one here is around 4,000 hertz and it's very audible. Right here, there's an exhale. Maybe we could work on that, but the main problem is this crumpling paper here. Let's put in a spectral edit. Going to make a time selection like this. Going to the action list, and we're choosing this option, spectrogram add spectral edit to item. You can double click that or we can click run. We're going to be putting in a couple, so I'll just leave this window open. Now if we clear our time selection, we can see that there's this white box around where we had that time selection. So I'm going to drag the top edge down so it's just a kind of a short horizontal line. And I'm going to put the center of that right over the offending sound. In the middle of this editing box, there's a handle that we can move things around with. We can grab the edges and resize them. So grab a corner, you can resize it like that. Grab the bottom edge, you can resize it like that way or this way. For this, where it's going from digital silence into the sound and then back to digital silence, we don't need to worry about our time selection that much, just frequency. On the sides, we have controls. Top one is gain. Below that, we have region time fade and frequency fade. We have compression threshold and ratio, and we have gate threshold and noise floor. For this particular sound, we're going to be using just the gain and the frequency fade. So I'm going to turn this down. Let's turn it down by 7 dB and see if it's still audible. I'm also going to use the frequency fade just to kind of, it just adds in a fade into that selected area.
Before.
Okay, so I can still hear that. Maybe increase the range a little bit.
Before.
That's better, but it's not quite enough. Let's go down a little bit in gain, 12 dB.
Before.
That's a pretty big improvement. Let's narrow this down a little bit.
Before.
And it's kind of tricky sometimes to just to get that dialed in right.
Before.
A little bit more. Let's see how far we can go. If we go 32 dB, is it going to be noticeable?
Before.
That actually works pretty well, but I don't want to go that far. So let's use that frequency fade, and let's try 19 dB.
Before.
And let's bypass that.
Before.
And we can also solo it. Soloing doesn't invert the signal, which you might expect. Put the gain back to 0. We can hear just what we're taking out. So that can be helpful for isolating your selection, like this. So I don't think we're missing anything from the actual voice there. Turn this down. And unsolo this. Right-click on the handle. Right-click on the handle. Unsolo it.
Before.
So that's the first one. This top one, let's take that out anyways. And let's just do it really quickly by holding down Command or Control on the PC, dragging that up. And now we've just made a copy of the last edit. So this edit is from 19 kilohertz to 21 kilohertz. And this one down here is 4.1K to 6.1K, 6.2K. We can't hear this top one. It's not really going to make any difference in what's audible, but let's just get rid of it because we can. Now, let's take care of this clunk here. And so I'm just going to make a time selection, add spectral edit, and clear my time selection like this. I'm going to make this full spectrum and something like this. Add a bit of a time fade and reduce the gain. Maybe something like this. We'll reduce that exhale as well. This could actually go all the way to the end. Because there's no dialogue there. We can just bring that down.
Before. Before.
This is going to have to be a combination of standard editing and spectral editing. What I would do, if that was the case, where I need to fill that in, I would take a cut like this and copy it over.
Before.
Something like that. Well, that's not everything that's new in this update, but it's enough for today. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Support the Reaper blog through Patreon. And visit reaperblog.net for a lot more tutorials.